Welcome, friends, family, and guests to the Wellness by Design Group podcast. I am your host, Rob Moffett. Wellness by Design Group would like to humbly welcome to our audience today Dr. Sandy Colvard. With over 17 years of private practice and hospital experience, Dr. Colvard is an accomplished naturopathic physician specializing in integrative cancer care. Dr. Colvard believes in an integrative approach to cancer and has worked with some of the nation's top clinical and academic oncologists, as well as a myriad of alternative therapy providers and modalities. She believes there is no one-size-fits-all model to cancer. I just want to thank you for that first.
You're welcome.
Dr. Colvard uses research-based supplements and treatments to avoid drug interaction and limit the side effects. Dr. Colvard works seamlessly with provider team of choice to curate the healing process that works for the individual. Currently working in both clinical practice and academia, Dr. Colvard works on one-on-one with cancer patients and cancer survivorship, leading cancer support groups, medical visits in Southern California. Prior to her current practice, Dr. Colvard served as the Director of Integrative Training for CHI Healthcare, a nonprofit, multidisciplinary primary care clinic in the Washington, D.C. area. Dr. Colvard also served as a naturopathic physician at Cancer Treatment Centers of America hospitals in both Atlanta, Georgia, and Philadelphia, PA, treating patients in both outpatient and inpatient settings. There, she attained her board certification as a Fellow of the American Board of Naturopathic Oncology, or as we know as FABNO. Well, congrats and welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for asking me to be here.
Well, I wouldn't want any different. As I said earlier, you and I have had this conversation many times, and
Yes,
finally
we
we're going
have.
to put a mic in between us and let others hear. I think, first of all, I'd really like to get into some of your background
Okay.
and really understand if you could tell us what led you to the naturopathic oncology direction.
Well,
Or maybe even go back farther than that. Maybe,
what made me go into naturopathic medicine to begin with was I was doing my undergrad at Smith College, and I was a neuroscience major, and I thought I was going to go into neuroscience research. And then I realized that that meant that I was going to spend a majority of my time in a lab with brains, but I'm a people person. And then it was at that time that I discovered naturopathic medicine. One of my professors told me about it. And so I did some research and I interviewed at several of the colleges and wanted to go to the one in Arizona. And then so I went to the one in Arizona, and my plan was never to go into oncology, quite frankly. My plan was to do more like women's medicine, looking at other types of healthcare, maybe some primary care work. And I just kept getting cancer patients coming to me. But prior to my time, the big thing for me, prior to my time going to naturopathic medical school, is that my mother was diagnosed with an unknown illness. And she had so many different diagnoses and they were all wrong. And then in my first quarter of medical school, I got an emergency phone call that she had been rushed to the hospital. And by the time I got there, because I was in Arizona and she was in Kentucky, she was nonverbal, her organs were shutting down. And it came out that what probably caused my mother to die was a very rare lymphoma, but we still don't know for sure.
Sure.
So when I graduated from medical school, I thought, I don't want to have anything to do with cancer.
Right.
Keep it away from me.
Right.
And yet I just kept getting more and more patients coming to me. And then I received an opportunity to go to cancer treatment centers in Philadelphia. And I thought, well, it keeps coming up, so I might as well go.
Right.
And that was the start of it. I was at CTCA for several years, almost 5 years, maybe longer. And that's where I really dug in, because that's all I saw every day was cancer patients.
Yeah, I can imagine that plays a toll on you.
Absolutely.
But you brought up the personal side, and we'll get into this later more, but I'd want to say that it shows.
Oh, thank you.
And I just remember working with you originally, and we just go in your office and talk, and there was no time limit. We talked about that, and I think that's important in medical care, that the doctors actually sit down and talk to their patients and
Ab-
understand the patients. And I think that is a lost, I don't want to say art, because it's not art. I think it's necessary.
right. I have to agree with you. I think that that's one of the things that drew me to naturopathic medicine in the first place was the time. I didn't want to go into traditional medicine because I don't want somebody telling me I have 10 minutes to talk to somebody. How do you learn about somebody in 10 minutes? How do you understand what their fears and their hopes and dreams? And they have a cancer diagnosis, and they're usually frightened.
Right.
So you got to take the time to listen. And we forget sometimes to just. I used to teach at the medical school, and I would tell my students that the primary thing when you're in the room with a patient is to shut up and listen and ask the right questions, because the patient has things that they have to tell you.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And then with your school and then the certification of FABNO, maybe you want to talk about that
Sure.
certification a little bit, what that means and what it took to get that.
Right. It's a very arduous process. We had to see so many patients, so many cancer patients, and then write reports about the patients that we had seen. So we had to have so many patient contacts in a year, and then write about some of the top. I think it was top 25 patients, and what we did and what the diagnosis was and what the treatments were, et cetera, et cetera. And then after doing all of that, we had to take an exam, and it was a very extensive, I think it was like a 3-hour or so exam with not only naturopathic treatments of different cancers, but what is cancer? How, what's the mechanism of action of certain chemotherapy drugs? I mean, very much an oncology, like an oncologist. I don't know that every oncologist would have known all the answers, and my apologies to any oncologists that's listening, but it was very extensive and it was a lot of work. And then studying a lot of the research and making sure that what we were doing was evidence-based, that we're just not throwing things out there willy-nilly.
Right. And then is that something you have to continue education and do things along every year?
All the time.
Yeah.
And you have to get recertified as a FABNO every 10 years, but in the meantime, you have to do so many continuing education credits in order to maintain that as well.
Sure. And is there, like, in America, is there like a certain amount of people with FABNOs? Like of that, is it 10%? Is it 3%?
I think that it's, my goodness, I think there was a total of maybe 1,800 to 2,000,
Okay.
maybe.
Okay.
And I'm not even sure, but it's less than, I think it would be less than 10% of all the naturopaths in the country.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. And then what about talking about how naturopathic medicine approach to cancer? This is going to be a loaded big question. Approach to cancer treatment is different from conventional medicine.
Well, I first want to say that I think that sometimes we need conventional medicine.
Yes.
We need surgery.
Yes.
We need chemotherapy, because chemotherapy does its job. We don't like the side effects from it, but it does its job. And then, of course, sometimes we need radiation as well. But my approach, or a naturopathic approach, is to look at the whole person, find out it's not just what cancer you have. You're not just your cancer. You're not just your chemotherapy. It's, what are you eating? How are you feeling? How are you sleeping? Are you going to the bathroom on a regular basis? Do you have constipation or diarrhea? These are very important things, because we need to think about the toxicity that's going on in the body, particularly when you're going through treatment. So it's looking at the whole person, also asking about anxiety, depression, any other, issues like that, because we want to keep the body as stress-free as possible, right? But it's my forte, I think, is working with people going through the treatment, because as a FABNO, my training in chemotherapy has been extensive. So I know the supplements that are safe with certain drugs and those that we can't use.
Right.
And that makes a big difference. And that's why I encourage people to please, if they're going to see a naturopath, see somebody who's been trained that way, so you're not getting something that might go at cross purposes with the drugs you're on.
Which I consider myself very lucky to have found you.
Oh.
Because, I mean, that was my purpose to get to you, was to have someone come alongside and help me, protect me from the side effects.
Right.
And, it was interesting how you and I were connected. I think it was my acupuncturist put something on a board somewhere online, and either you or someone responded and said, send them my way. And then so that's how I got connected with you. But again, I was looking for a naturopath that would be willing to, like you said, go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important to talk about is, what are some of the ways that as a naturopath that you work with traditional medicine, traditional oncologists? I mean, you brought up the supplements, and I think that's a big one.
Right.
And you might even talk about what some of those supplements are that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think later I'd really would like to talk a little bit about, low dose naltrexone.
Sure.
A little bit too.
Sure.
But why don't you talk about a little bit about the supplements that are out there that.
Oh, there's a lot of supplements. If you go online, you're going to see so many things.
Right.
And so I really encourage people that please talk to somebody who knows about what these supplements are. Because for example, there was a woman that I saw at cancer treatment centers many years ago who came in with 2 shopping bags full of supplements that somebody had told her that that's what she needed.
Right.
And yet it also showed me the power of marketing, the power of the supplements, and the power of the cancer fear.
Yeah.
Because when I went through all the supplements with her, and I said, you need these, all of these that took up like a bag and a half, you don't need, she immediately started to cry because she said, what if one of those ones is going to keep my cancer away?
Right.
And that was a big moment for me to realize that you really have to be able to explain to people why this is working, why this would work, why this doesn't, and why this would interfere with any chemo, and et cetera, et cetera. So there's, with the supplements that I use, there are what I call my core 4, which are kind of B vitamins, because we want the body. B vitamins help us handle stress.
Yeah.
There used to be an old vitamin called stress tabs, and all they were the B vitamins. Mm-hmm. And so I use B vitamins when it's appropriate. I use fish oils or omega-3s almost all the time. Fish oils, believe it or not, are something that we can use with almost every cancer, and in particular with hematologic cancers, leukemia, lymphoma, myeloma. They are very safe, and they help the body fight that cancer.
There's research out there saying that omega-3s are even helping with longevity.
Absolutely. They're very anti-inflammatory. The DHA portion of the omega-3s helps feed the brain. The EPA helps us with cholesterol. It lowers inflammation. It helps the hair, skin, and nails. So it does a lot. But as it's lowering the inflammation, it allows the immune system to be able to fight the cancer. And so core 4, we had B vitamins, omega-3s, vitamin D3, so important.
Yeah.
We must get up to a good level of vitamin D3. I know that there are still people out there that say that the D's, if you're in the 30s, you're good. Well, I would respectfully disagree, because we're finding more and more newly diagnosed cancer patients that have lower vitamin D. Some of them are actually low, like in the 20s or the teens, but some of them are, considered normal, very low normal, and we're still getting diagnosed. We know that vitamin D3 is not just for the bones. It's not just the sunshine vitamin. It helps the immune system tremendously.
Absolutely.
And if we can get the level of D3 between 50 and 80, sometimes a little more, that's great for a cancer patient. And there's a lot of talk about the toxicity of vitamin D3. You can go over 100. The research shows us well over 100, 150 before we start having toxicity. Now, everybody's different.
Sure.
And so you have to always monitor that and keep track of the labs. The other thing I love to use just as a basic is magnesium.
Yeah.
Magnesium at bedtime relaxes the muscles. If you're having any bowel issues, it helps the bowels move. It helps you get into a deeper sleep. And so
Yeah.
those are my core four. And then then it depends on the cancer and depends on the treatment.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, and then when I came and saw you, we had quite a bit of conversations about supplements, and we talked about various things, and I'm still taking some of them today, and actually probably most of them today. And then we did a couple of things outside of that. We looked at high dose vitamin C because that was one of the reasons why I was seeking someone like you, was to get access to that, and then also the naltrexone, low dose naltrexone. The I think the high dose vitamin C is something that's out there, and it kind of frustrated me quite a bit during my journey that why aren't other people talking about this?
Right.
And it's at the end of the day, it's vitamin C, and it just really, really, I think challenged me. I think I learned so much during this journey of I don't want to say mishaps, but people aren't looking in the right direction, and we can get into why that is. I don't want to, but they're looking at something, and versus you have these other things over here that could really help you. And I think one thing I learned through this too is I was doing a couple things. I was looking at fighting the cancer, minimizing the side effects, and then the other one was just my overall health.
Right.
Is how do I get my overall health better?
Right.
And then it got to a place now where I've got to that place, and I'm so grateful for it. But then I'm also now, okay, I'm here. Now, where do I go from here?
Right.
And again, it looks at longevity, looks at fighting other diseases. And so that's kind of my track that was one. I learned a lot in this chapter. Now, how do I carry it through the next and the next and the next? But the high dose vitamin C, working with you on that, I mean, we set it up so I had my immunotherapy the week, and then the following week we did vitamin C.
Right.
And so every 3 weeks I was getting immunotherapy, and then the week after, every 3 weeks getting the vitamin C.
Vitamin C. Right.
And it gave me that level of support, maybe more of a psychological effect than I knew. And as I kind of sit back and go back and look over again this last 18 months, there was a lot of that I believe it worked on me, but I also believe that the psychological side of it was very important. And I think that's what I want others to understand is when we do these various things, various treatments, the mental side of it is very important.
Absolutely.
I met with someone this last weekend, and he's going in, actually had surgery today to remove a tumor on his neck.
Okay.
And he was so positive about his medical team. And I said, there's nothing I need to say. The fact that you have that opinion and you feel that, you're more than halfway there.
Exactly.
If you have that trust, and I think that's what got to me was once I built the team around myself, I had the trust.
Exactly.
I go, I have a team that I can go after anything, and I was grateful for that and I had all these various therapists and practitioners. So I felt like whatever came my way, I had the resources around me to fight it.
Right. And I think that what you did was so important because when some people go through cancer therapies, they feel disempowered. They're so powerless. The oncologist tells them what to do, or this person tells them what to do, and they just go and they're doing it. But to be able to say, I've got a team. I've got my acupuncturist over here that's going to help me. I've got the naturopath. Maybe I have a chiropractor. Maybe I have a massage therapist.
Right.
And the fact that you're taking power over your own health means so much. And if we can do something to improve the hope.
Yeah.
One of my things that I loved about CTCA, unfortunately, they're no longer in business, but one of the things I loved about them was their mission and their vision was all about hope.
Yeah.
We never take that away.
And that word is so powerful. So when I went to see my oncologist, the second one, not the first one, she shook my hand and she put her hand on my shoulder and she shook my wife's hand.
Right.
And just that simple gesture gave me a glimpse of hope, that she had compassion for me, that she was going to care for me, and I wasn't just a number.
Right.
And then you, similar, we went in your office, we talked, it was very personable. It wasn't rushed. Again, you gave me hope. And I think the other thing is what I really enjoyed about working with you is that in some ways we have a similar mindset in how we wanted to go after this. And so it was really just like, to some degree, you helped me support my ideas. You had some other ones to bring along, and then we were together able to execute. And I think that was extremely valuable. And I think that, again, hope is so important, whether it's cancer, this disease, this medical challenge, whatever we're going through.
Right.
I think that's what the world's missing right now.
Absolutely. Hope and love. It all comes down to love. And what I think that is important also when I see a new patient is that, you've said it a couple of times, that we had a conversation. And, I had a new patient today. I'd seen her a week or so ago, but we didn't get to finish because she was very emotional. She was very upset, very, scared about her diagnosis. And we just sat and talked. And we talked less about the diagnosis and more about how she was feeling.
Yeah.
Because in addition to oncology, my other main thing is anxiety and depression and grief.
Right.
Which they kind of go hand in glove,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
And we just talked about that, and we talked about how she saw herself when she looked in the mirror, and we talked about how she felt about her family. And when she came back today, she brought her husband, and the first thing she said to me is that you changed my life. And her husband looked at me and just said, you've changed everything that she's thinking. And all I did was have a conversation. That's all I did, is just listen to her and point out that not all is lost.
Right. Yeah. And then, so with that, you have individual patients and you seem to then tailor the treatment plan per those individuals.
Exactly.
And it probably depends on the type of cancer, the stage of cancer,
all of it.
And then just their overall health and
absolutely. I mean, even if I have 5 people with breast cancer, for example, they're all going to be a little different. It's all about the diagnosis. What kind of cancer is it? What type? Or is it hormone positive, et cetera, et cetera? But then we have to tailor it based upon the chemotherapy, if they're getting chemo, radiation, if they're getting radiation. I have protocols to help people prepare for and recover from surgeries, but everyone's different. And that's what made me become a naturopathic doctor, is like, for example, when I get a cold, I might sneeze. When you get a cold, you could have a fever. Everybody's different.
I get it for a day and someone gets it for a week.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So it's a matter of figuring out, what's that person's labs, but more importantly, what's their stresses? What are they eating? Nutrition is so important. Are they drinking enough water? What are they doing to take care of themselves? Are they moving their bodies? My goodness, we have to move. We were never meant to be sedentary creatures.
Yeah. Yeah, I've really changed over the years in terms of my movement. Walking is key for me. It's one of those things it's almost like medication. And, physical, yes, but I think the biggest thing I get out of it, and I've talked about it several times, and a big component of it is the mental side of it.
Absolutely.
There's creativity that shows up in those moments. There's, able to think through a lot of things. And just the moment of just walking and just being in nature. And, if I'm not listening to something, just listen to the birds, listen to, the world.
Exactly.
And there's something about that, just that moment. I know that I have that hour, whatever that time is, it's mine. And I get to decide how how I go through it, literally.
I'll ask people to take a walking meditation, if you will, because put your phone down. Don't think you have to do so many miles in a certain amount of time. Don't look at your steps. Just walk. Enjoy the weather. Listen to the birds. Walk in the grass. Go, just enjoy that time because we forget how to do that.
And it's something we can do it for many, many years.
Exactly.
And so it's funny when I walk on the trail here. I'm one of the younger people on the trail, which, doesn't say much, but I am. And I used to laugh about, like, why isn't other people out here walking? And I'm really frustrated about it. Is like, well, why aren't they out here walking? The older people are. They know it's good for them. So why isn't it being communicated down? And I don't understand that. And what's interesting to me is I feel like, 50s, even 60s and below, people feel like you have to run.
Right.
Well, I need to run. No, you don't.
No.
I mean, and then people don't do it because, for me and my knees, it's hard for me to run. So walking is something I can actually do. It doesn't give me knee pain. I don't have any issues with my knee when I walk. And it strengthens my gait. I mean, all kinds of things it does.
And it moves the circulatory system. It moves the lymphatic system. Yeah. And, there was a great study. They took about, I want to say, around 16 to 1,700 women. And with these women, they had stage 1, 2, or 3 breast cancers. And all they did was ask these women to please walk 30 minutes a day for 5 days a week.
Okay.
That's it. 30 minutes. That's nothing.
That's nothing.
And they followed them for a period of time. And what they found is the women who actually did the walking had a greater than 54% reduction in any rate of reoccurrence of cancer, simply by walking.
Wow.
And there's research articles on exercise in almost every type of cancer. It's not just breast cancer, right? We all need to move. We were not meant to sit in front of a computer all day long, and we need to get our eyes away from the screens so much of the time.
Right.
We need to just take the time to be.
Yeah.
And we forget.
And it's nice that once I finished my treatment, I started getting my energy levels back and really noticing, like, oh, wow, I have energy again. And then, deciding, now that you have energy, you need to change your exercise. Right. And so that's when I went into the jumping rope with the heavy ropes and hitting the heavy bag, which we talked about.
Yes.
And it's been a tremendous therapy for me. And I say therapy because I think a big portion of it is for my mental health. And I noticed that hitting that heavy bag with no repercussions, hit it any way I want, as hard as I want, is so important for my mental state. It levels me out. I feel like I'm present more, and the physical is just a byproduct.
Right.
And then now I'm adding stuff to that, more weights and things like that. And so it's just, again, I don't think I would be in that state if I hadn't gone through the journey I just went through.
Right.
It's like you get that, you hear it all the time. You get that second chance, whatever that looks like. I don't know if it's a second chance, but I'm going to take the best advantage of it, the biggest advantage I can, and do something. And I think that is also a way of creating hope. And I don't know if creating is the right word, but instilling hope. Because, people say, if I get through this, I'm going to do something. But if you really get to do it.
Right.
And that's the thing. A friend of mine told me his son went through some health issues when he was young. And he had fire in his belly when his son was sick and kind of getting to the tail end.
Right.
And then it kind of over time, he's gotten better. And he said, I lost the fire. And so that instilled into me, he's like, don't lose the fire, Rob.
Right.
Do it now. Whatever that is, do it now. Not 3 years, not a year. Do it now.
Do it now.
And I think that's been really important to really keep me motivated. And I think I explained to you too, the other thing with the jump rope and the bag was me psychologically still fighting the cancer.
Of course.
And because once I was done with immunotherapy, I was like, kind of, as much as I wanted to be done with it, there was this level of like feeling like, oh, this is protecting me or taking care of me. And,
absolutely.
And so when I was done, I was like, what do I do?
Right. And that's what I hear over and over again. I run a cancer remission group at the medical center where I work, and the the people, when they're done with therapy, the oncologists, and and love them, they do their job, but they're not designed to tell you what to do afterwards. They're just like, go ahead and eat and do whatever, and you're okay, and that's not true. People are wanting something to say, what can keep this away from me? What will make it not come back? And I wanted to say, when you said, instilling hope, I think it's more, as children, we have hope every day. As a child. We're hoping that Christmas is going to come tomorrow, even though it's June.
Right.
We're hoping all these things. I think it's remembering hope. I think it's remembering who we are, and remembering that we have this capability of hoping. And I think that that's so important. And as far as you and I had this conversation, but the heavy bag and the ropes and everything, I have a heavy bag, and I used to play softball. And so for me, when everything's too much, my thing is go to the batting cage and beat the softballs until I'm tired, or get to the heavy bag. And because I think that sometimes that's a good stress relief. And like you said, it's not hurting anybody. It's, you have good arms when you're done from working out, but you just get it out. And we forget to do that. And we go home and we're full of stress and we're full of frustration. And we forget that we can let that go.
Right.
And when we were kids, we would run around and ride our bikes and do everything, and we could let it go. But we forget it as adults. And I think I've had so many patients recently, and you and I haven't talked in a while, but I've had so many patients recently who have said the exact same thing. They come to me and they're like, the cancer has been a change for me. This is a change in my life, and this is a gift. I can't tell you how many people say it's been a gift, because now they're remembering what they should be doing.
Yeah. And that, for me, was a huge turn of events to have those words and say those words.
Right.
That cancer was a gift in so many ways.
Oh, it's hard to say.
It is hard to say, and it's it's hard for me to say because there's so many people suffering with cancer.
Right.
And every day, the diagnosis of cancer just goes up and up and up. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of people. Like, every day I hear another story. And I'm not even in that space. Right. I'm just in society and culture and living our lives. And it's just overwhelming in that sense that this C word that's out there is overtaking us.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that, I'm focusing on how I can help others get that hope, because I felt like going through this, I learned a lot, but the biggest thing I want to do was, how do I use this to help others? And that gave me a purpose.
Right.
Not just the hope, but it gave me a purpose. It wasn't like, oh, I hope this is okay and I hope I'm okay. It's no, there's where I'm going.
Right.
I have a purpose to help others. And so all that, the hope was just a piece of that, but then the purpose really drove me.
Absolutely. And that's part of, there's a book called Radical Remission.
Yeah.
And what Radical Remission really says is that out of the 10, key factors that Dr. Kelly Turner found of radical remission, only 3 of them are physical things that we can do. One of them was to radically change your diet.
Yeah.
One was to see somebody who could talk to you about supplements and all of that. And one was to exercise and to move your body. But everything else was about, what's your purpose? What do you have to live for? Looking at your stressors, forgiving yourself for things you have done in the past, forgiving others, just enjoying the life that you have. And it's really incredible when I am able to talk about that with patients and just remind them that this is, because the diagnosis is all consuming, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's all you can think about.
Like you brought up the fear earlier. I mean, you just can't get away from it.
That's right.
And especially the beginning, the front, when you first get it, and you haven't talked to any team, you have nothing. You have no protocol, you have no treatment plan, you don't know where you're going. And that part is just it's very heavy.
Very. And a lot of times the news is not delivered to you in a way that's very kind, which I
Right.
find disturbing at
Yeah.
best. I think that there's no way to sugarcoat the fact that that somebody has cancer, but I think sometimes it could be presented in a bit nicer way.
Yeah, and then you're talking about treatment a little bit too. Is you and I chatted about this a little bit.
Sure.
Is the mental health side of treatment in terms of the treatment room, the treatment environment. We, I think that's truly so valuable. I think the one thing I was interesting, I've thought about this, and maybe you've seen this in some of your other stops, but how come in these treatment rooms with the chemo and immunotherapy, there's not like a therapist in there just kind of circling and just having, like you said, having conversation with these people, say, hey, how you doing today? And if they really need to go deeper, they could maybe later go in another room and talk, or next time they go into a private room and get their treatment and have that conversation. Is that being done?
In some places, yes. And I will tell you that, unfortunately, the model is no longer being used. But when I was at CTCA, we did have people walking through the chemotherapy rooms, and the chemotherapy suites were very well put together. They were lovely. They weren't ugly and industrial looking. There was private spaces for people who wanted privacy. There were some places where you could all get your IVs in a little group, and then of course this is pre-COVID, but then people could share with one another. How are you doing? How are you feeling? But there was always a therapist around. The naturopaths, we always went up to walk through the the IV place, just to check on people and how are they doing. And then there was also pastoral care that walked around.
Sure.
And so I found that I was actually surprised when I went to a different hospital and saw that that's not how it was. Because I thought,
Yeah,
this is
normal.
This is normal. This is what we should all be doing.
Made sense.
Right. And, and then I'm very proud at UCI, the IV room that we have now, the new IV room is beautiful.
Yeah.
You're looking outside. I mean,
I could make some comments about what the architect did, but
well,
that's
of
another
course,
side.
of course, I could make lots of comments about the architect, but I think it's very lovely.
Absolutely.
It's not, but in some of the big, chemo hospitals, when you've got the whole IV and people are getting their IV chemo, it could just be a little gentler, and it could encourage a little, like you say, a little hope. It could encourage some conversations between patients, and sometimes, I've seen patients who don't want to talk to anybody, and that's okay. That's their right.
Yeah.
But then let's give them a private space.
Right.
And let other people who might need to talk. I had one lady who would have her chemotherapy, and then she was getting ready for radiation, and she said that she ran around to all the people in the room that were going to get radiation next and said, have you seen Dr. Colvard? She does this special thing for radiation. You've got to follow this protocol. And, and she said she made so many friends just by talking to folks.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting, and like, I look at it, the first time I went to the treatment room, not at UCI, I almost turned around and walked out. I mean, it was a gut punch for sure. I wasn't prepared. Let's put it that way. I thought I was, but I wasn't. And I just looked at everyone. They looked half dead.
Yes.
And like, where am I going? This is not where I want to go. And so it really hit me hard. So I had to learn for myself how to prepare to go into that every day.
Right.
So I bought the Bruce Lee t-shirt, and that was my shirt I wear every time when I got infusion, because there was things I just needed to do just to prepare myself to go in that. And I'm not a needle person, even though I do acupuncture all the time.
Right.
But those needles are huge for immunotherapy. And they, of course, remember they couldn't find my vein sometimes. Yeah, go on and on. But I look at, from my background in design, we deal with guest experience. And you mentioned that.
Yep.
And so I look at these treatment rooms, there should be plants,
Yes.
natural light. I think even music, some level of music.
Right.
And then like you said, someone going around talking and helping people whether it's a psychiatrist, a life coach, somebody, to give, because again, that one person might instill to one individual that one day some hope.
Exactly.
And that, again, I'm going to go back to that hope is, I think, a key component to survival.
Right.
And getting through it.
And, in an IV suite or a infusion center, I should say, there's going to be reasons where they can't have a lot of plants. They're going to, but I think that there could be places for
they
plants.
could do treatments on the walls, like fun treatments on the wall.
They could do that. And
there's all kinds of things they could do.
And, have something besides just television screens.
They do it for kids.
Right, exactly.
I mean, why not do it for the adults?
That's right.
And especially in those, we're not feeling good. We don't want to be there.
Right.
And we're scared.
Absolutely.
So do something to help with that. And I'm actually even looking into, and I don't know how yet, and I'm bringing this up to you, is how I can maybe help others in that space. I'm talking to them, whether that's, like I said, sitting with them while they're getting it, or just kind of, as they go through their treatment, having conversations with them and helping them out, because for me, I had one person I met that actually had melanoma and had a couple of surgeries. But other than that, I didn't have anyone to talk to that had been going through cancer. That was challenging, even though I had all these other great resources around me. And even my family, it's hard to have some of those conversations.
Right.
They don't want to talk to you because they're nervous of how you feel, maybe, and then vice versa.
And they don't know what to say sometimes.
Right. They don't know what to say.
Right.
I'm nervous or scared to say how I really feel because I don't want to scare them.
Right.
And so there's this weird thing where we're not really talking. And I think having someone else outside of that they can just say, hey, I'm scared out of my mind.
There's a lot of places that allow volunteers. You have to check with the hospital, check with the infusion center, and then there's all the HIPAA laws. So you have to make sure that you go through and, non-disclosure and signing, go through the HIPAA training and all of that. But if they don't have it at all the hospitals around here, they should.
Yeah, I agree.
Because people need, that's what I love about my cancer group, is that we have, no more than 10 people in a room. And every week we talk about a new topic, whether it's nutrition or supplements, etc. But we have an hour long where we're checking in with everybody and the bonding that happens. Yeah. And people saying, well, this and this happened to me. Well, I tried this and this helped that symptom. And they're like, oh. And then they come back the next week and they're like, you're right, that was good. And that sort of thing is so important because the shared experience means so much.
Yeah, and the good and the bad, right? They go through the bad together, they go through the good together.
Exactly.
And, that's important in all of our facets for our life. We're not meant to go through this world alone.
No, we are not hermits.
No. There's probably, and I've heard some, but I'd like to hear your comment on this, is some common misconceptions that people have about the naturopathic approach.
Oh my goodness, that's a whole nother podcast, I think.
I know.
But I think a lot of folks think that we're not real doctors. Well, and I can tell you that there are people, and there are particular states in the U.S. where people are allowed to call themselves a naturopath without going to medical school. They go to an online degree somewhere. I probably not very kindly call them undies instead of NDs because they haven't gone through a medical school. They haven't gone through training. Not everyone, to be full disclosure, that goes through naturopathic school goes through a residency program because there's simply not enough residencies to go around from the schools. But the majority of people I know, and particularly the FABNOs that I know, we have gone through a lot of training and being mentored or studying. Like my first year at CTCA, I shadowed people and I asked questions and I learned and I had to, I did a lot of work on what are the major chemos and what's this and what's that and how does that work. And, there was just a lot of training in that after I had already graduated. But I do encourage people who are looking for a naturopath, ask your naturopath where they graduated, number one, and then ask them where they hold their license. Only a licensed naturopath is allowed to say, I'm licensed in such and such. If it's somebody who's only done an online school, they might say, I'm a practitioner of naturopathy. That's a big clue. Is if they say, I do naturopathy, well, where did you go to school and where are you licensed? I think, and I want to be kind. I think that there are some really good people out there that are herbalists. They're really good people that do homeopathic remedies. They really care, but I think a patient needs to be careful with who they're getting all their information from.
Yeah, there's a lane they need to be in.
Right.
And you need to understand what lane you need to go in to find that practitioner.
Right.
And I think there's value for all those lanes, but you need to understand where you need to be.
Right.
Like you said, there could be someone herbalist that there is value to that. But is that is that all the value? Is it just, again, they need to stay in their lane. And that's what I've enjoyed, again, working with the various practitioners, what I consider on the natural Eastern medicine side. And I've talked about this in the past, is they understand the lane that they're supposed to be in.
Right.
That's it. And if they don't try to go, oh, I can help you with that. They say, oh, you should go see so-and-so, and here's their number. And so they really, I don't think they realize it either, that they're really a good, tight network and helping each other. They support each other. I don't know that is in the Western side in terms of, that side of things. I don't know, but I've experienced it, and I think it's really powerful that they understand, these practitioners, what lane they're in.
Right.
And they don't try to go outside of it.
And I think that's what I love about a lot of the naturopathic doctors and other practitioners is that when for example, I'm not an expert in Lyme disease, I'm not an expert in mold toxicity, but I know the people that are, and I will send you there because that's what they do all day, every day. The other thing, when you ask about misconceptions, I really wanted to mention this, is that one of the big misconceptions, particularly from some in the medical community, is that we're just doing things, willy-nilly, and we're just throwing things out there. Everything I do and everything every FABNO does that I know is evidence-based. We look at the research. I don't just say take curcumin for this or that or the other. I want to make sure curcumin is appropriate. And what did the research say about it with this particular chemotherapy or even after chemo's over? These are the things that we do look at the research. We're not just sitting here, pulling herbs out of the air.
Right. No, and that's something too, even working with you, we always talked about where the research was coming from and what it meant. And I think that's, again, important. It helps, I think, the patient on the other side go, again, feel confident with the information.
Right. It's
not just, you should just listen to what I'm saying because of the sign on the door. And I think, again, helping us educate us too. I think that's important too, is that I feel the medical care should be educating the patients more of what's out there, what's available. There's some basic things they always talk about. You brought them up: diet, sleep, maybe.
Yep.
Maybe.
Right.
It's funny is the more I'm learning about sleep, it's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Why aren't we talking about it?
We heal when we sleep.
Yeah. I was talking to my wife about this. That's one thing I'm going to teach my son, is how important sleep is.
Right.
No one taught me that. I mean, just in general, culturally, it was like, how late can you stay up? How many all-nighters can you pull?
Right. It's all about the all-nighters.
It was about, production, right? And not about your health and your, well-being.
Right.
And realizing, wow, sleep's really important. Luckily, I like sleep. So it wasn't hard for me. And I felt like I already had a good protocol of sleep. I've changed a little bit of it. And a lot of it's how I prepare to go to sleep and how I wake up. It's the bookends.
Right.
And even this in the between, I've done some things like I do mouth tape, so I tape my mouth closed every night, so I breathe through my nose only. And
I have some, but I'm hesitant to use that.
honestly, I did it, and it's I it's hard for me to sleep without it
Really?
now. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I feel I wake up less groggy because of it. Obviously, it's healthier for us in terms of breathing through our nose and getting filtered. And, of course, mouth breathing, as everyone knows, it's not good for us.
Right.
And so I think that doing that has also changed how I breathe during the day, and then working with people with breath work and slowing our breath down. It slows your breath down. You breathe through your nose only. So all these things, but again, learning how valuable sleep is and creating bookends has really helped me. I might probably take 30 plus minutes a night as a preparation of sleep,
Right.
a protocol that I go through. And I don't like to miss it. And I think it's really important. It really just prepares myself both mentally and physically. Get rid of the day. Because as you know, the hardest part of the day for me to go to sleep is shutting the mind off.
Right.
And I've been able to do that through this protocol, which has been very helpful. And I get better sleep, and just everything else is golden after that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so important. And I do a lot of work with people and just trying to get them to sleep through the night. And, are they waking? Are they waking afraid? Are they startling awake? Are they having nightmares? These are the things that we talk about. And what can we do, while they're working on what we call sleep hygiene, what you've, discovered that works for you.
Right.
But there are supplements that I use to help folks just kind of
Sure.
stop that mental chatter.
Yeah.
Let's just let our mind relax. And then the hardest thing, of course, is to get away from the screens when we go to bed.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then even when we wake up, not going to the screen right away. And it's both those bookends is how do we deal with that and how we look at that. And then we brought up how there's so much cancer out there right
Yes.
now.
Yes.
And is there something this is your opinion. I'm going to ask a couple questions in one. One is, what diagnosis of cancer are you seeing the most of out there? Two, do you feel like there's something in our world, in our environment, that is one of the bigger culprits of this? And then I think that's it. I have others, but I'm going to start with those for you.
Okay. Let's see. The most cancer I'm seeing, well, because I do spend one day a week at the UCI Breast Center, I am seeing a lot of breast cancers. But to be honest, what I'm really marveling at recently is two things. One is the amount of rare cancers I'm starting to see.
Okay.
Like really rare, like a pulmonary sarcoma. You don't see that. Sarcomas don't usually attack a pulmonary artery. And then some pretty rare lymphomas and leukemias. And then younger people.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask
Younger
you.
and younger people are getting colon cancer. And I can tell you that, in my opinion, that this is in large part, it's not the only reason, but it's called the standard American diet, which spells sad. We have to start getting back to eating whole foods. I don't mean, and I mean real food.
Yeah.
Cook it, go buy it. Don't, if you go down the aisle of the grocery store and it has an expiration date 3 years from now, that's not food.
Yeah.
That's not food.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember working with my great uncle and my grandma, and when they were canning foods, that's how we kept foods fresh. And then you knew what to do. If you pulled out one of the canned things, if it didn't look right, you threw it away. Right? Because you want real food.
Right. Yeah, I'm grateful. My wife is, she has brought that into our house, and she's a big component of that. And I just kind of went along with it. And then now I'm like, thank you.
Yes.
and even to the point where we're going even farther in that space,
Right.
more where we source our food, paying attention to that.
Absolutely.
We have some options to really get some, what I consider good sourced food.
Good.
Unfortunately, it costs more.
Of course.
And that's the challenge
Well,
out
and
there, is that the food that is sourced well and the food we should be eating costs a lot more money.
right.
And I don't like that.
No, and neither do I. But what I want to say, I think the best advice I ever got was years ago in school. One of the older docs who had been doing this forever just said that, there are things that we should buy. We should buy, we should look at the dirty dozen and the clean 15 for our fruits and vegetables. We should buy wild caught fish, not farm raised.
Yeah.
We should look at grass fed, grass finished beef if we eat beef.
Yeah.
Free range chicken, everything antibiotic free. However, if you're in a place that you can't afford that, then what you do is very simple, because it goes back to the whole idea of the mental, emotional, and the spiritual, and the hope is that you take your food and you wash it, or rinse it off, depending on what it is, and then you cook it and you bless it. And you say, this is for the good of my body. And that's the best you can do. And is that the right answer? I wish that more real food was available to the masses, but at least it's a step in the right direction, right?
Right.
So
Not fake meat.
not fake meat, not genetically modified whatever, right?
Yeah, and I've even been we've been eating more game, whether it's boar, bison, and then venison. I want to get to a place where I can actually, go out and hunt for my food, and, even fish. I think that, to me, is go to Alaska, with some guys and, bring a bunch of fish home
Right.
that we can eat over the year.
Get the real wild caught salmon.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And I think there's that, and then just how we eat. Obviously sugar is a big no, but I'm not perfect at that, and it's something I'm really trying to change.
Right.
Not realizing how affected we are by sugar in our society. Even with my son, I'm working with him. It's like I don't want to get into a place where it's hard for him not to have sugar.
Sure.
It's a treat. It's something we do every once in a while, but it's not something we consume all the time.
Well, and we know that sugar is addictive.
Yeah.
Sugar is highly addictive.
Yeah.
So if we're eating some, we're going to want more. But on the other hand, we're human beings, and we want to do celebrations, and we're coming up on Thanksgiving and then the holidays.
Right.
So there was something that I was taught a long time ago, is that, if you want something sweet, if you want a cookie, and I have so many cancer patients just like, well, I just had the cookie, I was so bad. I'm like, don't say that.
Yeah.
If you're eating something and you're being like, oh, I'm so bad, I hope nobody sees me do this, that's such a negative energy. So eat a cookie. Don't eat the bag. Just eat your cookie. And when you're eating it, think, this is the best thing I've ever had in my life. I'm so grateful I've got this cookie. And then there we go. Now, the hard part is not to eat another one, but I think it's possible.
Yeah. Right. What are probably your biggest challenges of a naturopath oncologist that you feel like you face, whether that's collaborating with other oncologists or just in general as a naturopath?
I think it's, as you said earlier, it's a misconception about who I am and what I do.
Right.
And that I'm not a quack. I've been to school. I went to 4 years just like every other doctor, and then the training afterwards. But another challenge that I still find, which can be frustrating at times, to be perfectly frank, is the lack of openness of certain doctors to understand what it is I'm doing.
Right.
The misinformation, which is unfortunate, and it's not. I'm not going to say it's their fault. I don't think it's willful ignorance or whatever, but still telling patients things that aren't true anymore, because I don't know, maybe they haven't kept up. I don't know, but there's still some doctors that are telling female patients, don't eat soy, it will give you cancer, which is totally the opposite. Soy, as a phytoestrogen, is actually protective in any hormone-positive cancer. But I mean, it's just, and then, the basic frustration of wanting to talk to perhaps an oncologist or another doc, and they don't want to talk to you because they don't think that you're a real person.
Right.
And it's sad.
It is.
But I also can say that the longer I do this and the more I work with oncologists, more and more people are referring people to me because they see that people are feeling better by doing what I tell them, what I ask them to do, recommend them to do.
It's not the same, but kind of similar. Is I felt like when I was going through the treatments and I brought out this, remember this what I shared with you?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
The pillars?
Yes.
And they kind of went, yeah, okay. And even as I would meet with them, I'd talk to them and, what are you doing? I'm doing sauna, I'm doing a cold plunge, I'm doing this, I'm fasting, go on and on. Oh, yeah. Then towards the end, when I'm almost done, they realized, wait a minute, this actually might be working. And then they asked more questions and then even told other people.
Right.
And that was, I don't know what the word is for that. I mean, interesting or, surprised that, they actually went, what's going on? What are you doing?
Right.
And I think that was important. I think it gave me hope that, maybe they're willing to learn.
Right.
And even some of the nurses would ask me questions. And it was like they actually are wanting to learn something. Not that they weren't learning, they were learning something different from a patient. And I even helped one of the nurses, her boyfriend was going through something. And I was able to give some, information of another doctor or practitioner I was working with so that he could get help.
Right.
That's because we talked. And if she hadn't asked questions or talked to me, he might not have got that resource.
Exactly.
To go. So back to your point of talking, these other doctors, it's critical.
Absolutely.
And it's unfortunate. I think it's, egos get in the way. I think that's one. I think you're right. There's people that just don't know. They don't know what they're not hearing.
Right.
And they don't realize that they're, just totally putting their hand out and not allowing other people to come in and have that conversation.
Right. But, I used to get very upset and think that it was just like it was us and them.
Right.
And it's not, because when I do stop and think about it, they had their training, really good training for what they do, but they didn't learn about nutrition.
No.
They didn't learn about all of the things that you and I have talked about today. And they're being asked to see a patient every 10, 15 minutes. And how do you keep track? How do you keep up? How do you absorb, So I have a lot more empathy now than I used to.
Right.
I was just like, okay, they don't know, so maybe one day I'll have a chance to talk with them. It was beautiful, again, going back to CTCA, that I worked alongside the medical oncologist and the radiation oncologist and the nurse practitioners. The medical oncologist would actually come to my room, knock on the door, give me the patient's chart and say, your turn. Go. I think he would say something like, "Go do your magic. Go do your thing. Make sure they stay well." And and that's how we worked together, and it was great. That was perfect, because then I would hand off to the dietitian, and we had already talked about what nutrition we wanted them to do. It was a great model. I'm sorry that it didn't continue in the way that it was, but it was a really good model.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and hopefully someday we'll see it again.
Right.
And hopefully near future for sure. And then in terms of the naturopath oncology side of things, you do a lot of research, you look at a lot of things. What excites you about the future of this space?
That's a good one. I think that the more doctors that are actually recognizing what we do, that's exciting.
Yeah.
I also quite frankly, from a medical oncology point of view, I'm very excited about some of the new immunotherapies.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about the targeted therapies
Yes.
because I think that that's going in the right direction. Instead of just flooding the body with a bunch of chemo that's killing good cells along with the bad, we are learning how to target those cancer cells. And then I think that as far as I'm concerned, as a naturopath, we are more research every day that's giving us ideas about, oh, well, this supplement does this, and this seems to be synergistic with this drug, so maybe we can help it work even better. And I'm still love the fact that I can work with patients with basic chemotherapy and keep their blood counts up. That's one of the things that I feel very strongly about. Like, so many people aren't able to get their chemo because their white blood cell count has gone down so low or their platelet count has gone down so low. Those little simple things that we have learned and that I have learned over the years that can help people keep their counts up so they can finish their chemo.
Right.
And they could be like you and they can say, I'm ringing the bell, I'm done with everything. Right?
Yeah.
And that's so important to me. But I'm really excited about the future of these new therapies that are coming out. And and I'm excited that we're doing some more research in things like mistletoe. Johns Hopkins doing a phase 2 clinical trial.
Okay.
As far as I know, it's still on a phase 2 clinical trial of mistletoe.
Yeah.
And they're specifically working on prostate cancer, but the implications are incredible.
Well, that's great.
And then all of the research has been done on low-dose naltrexone, which you had talked about earlier.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
It's an anti-inflammatory, it's an anti-cancer. We can use it. There's a doctor at UCI that uses it. She's a pain management doctor, so she uses it almost exclusively with all of her patients for pain management because it works so well. And then we know that in certain cancers, it has been seen to reduce tumor burden by up to 30%. And naltrexone has been around forever. And a lot of people recognize naltrexone as the drug that's used for opioid overdoses. It's used
To block.
It's used to block the opioids. But what they discovered, and there's a really good website if anybody wants to go to it, it's the ldnresearchtrust.org, that they've done a ton of research on LDN. So starting at a very low dose, starting at either 1 milligram or 1.5 milligrams, and then working up to usually no more than 4.5 milligrams, we have seen it help people sleep, reduce aches and pains, reduce inflammation. I even use it with some of my autoimmune patients to lower autoimmune antibodies.
Yeah. Well, I think the interesting part too is very low side effects.
Yes.
And I think that's what for me was, okay, there's very low side effects, so the upside is pretty good.
And it does not interfere with any of the other drugs. So there's no contraindications. And the only side effect, and I'll be frank, the only side effect that I know of is that some people who take it at bedtime wake up in the middle of the night.
Right.
And some people can have some weird dreams.
Yeah.
And it usually dissipates after a
It
few
does.
weeks.
I remember just a little off when I first started taking it, and you and I talked about maybe you should take it in the morning versus at night, and I ended up just still taking it at night, and eventually it just kind of went away, and I didn't have the issues. And it's a very reasonable price drug.
Very reasonable price.
I mean, I think I would get 3 months for $40 or something.
Exactly.
I mean, it was...
It's certainly different than some of the other alternative therapies out there.
True. And why... So when I remember I actually brought you something I printed about naltrexone the first time I met you, and I pulled it out, and you said, absolutely. And I remember you were able to give me a prescription for it.
Right.
I let my oncologist know because I was being
Of course.
transparent. This is what's happening. Are you good with it? She said, I'm good, but I can't prescribe it for you. Why is that?
That's a really good question.
Okay.
I know docs that have no problem prescribing it.
Okay.
Perhaps it's because they don't think that's in their lane.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I prescribe it all the time.
Yeah. And I think for me, again, it was I share with a lot of people because I think there's something there. I just look at the fact that there's this drug out there that no one's talking about, And then that research website that you mentioned just now, there's so much data. I was just on it the other day looking at new stuff.
Right.
And I'm probably going to go in it again because I just want to, it looks like it has a lot of powerful opportunity
Yes.
and it's not being used.
Right. And
Just
we
like a
have
lot of stuff.
right. And I haven't even, I think, touched my pinky toe into the waters of LDN to know everything that it does.
Right. I
You
mean,
know, there's so much.
right. And I think getting that information out there, helping people understand what's out there and that it even exists.
Right.
And then we brought up the vitamin C earlier. And why do you think the vitamin C is so important? Like, what do you see how it helps the patients? And
Well, I
I have some opinion.
without going into a whole lot of detail, I think part of it is what you mentioned earlier, is that giving the patient the power to be doing something for themselves, number one. But the way that I use the vitamin C is that we start off with a low dose low dose meaning 10 grams, which is 10,000 milligrams, which is a lot, with some vitamins and minerals, and then we'll move up to the next level with vitamins, minerals, and amino acids, because we're building up the body. And when we do vitamins and minerals via an IV, we're bypassing the GI tract. And so we don't have to worry about any malabsorption of a B vitamin or anything, because we're going right into the vein, right? And we do it, we see your tolerance, and there's always, before we do any vitamin C infusion, we always run a test to make sure that your body can handle it. It's called a G6PD test.
I remember that.
Right? And then we can move up to 50 grams of vitamin C. And at that point, once you get past a certain level, like 10, 15 grams-ish, it stops being an antioxidant and it becomes a pro-oxidant. And a pro-oxidant is what kills cancer cells. That's what a chemotherapy is. It's a pro-oxidant. So there's a lot of talk out there about you shouldn't use antioxidants when you're on chemotherapy. There's evidence to say that's not necessarily always the case. But IV vitamin C at higher doses has been used to help. It helps kill cancer cells as well. And I know that's a pretty dramatic statement to make, but it's true.
I mean, I've heard cases of it. That they've treated cancer only with that.
Right.
And like anything, it's based on the individual and what they were diagnosed with, and on and on. But I've heard that. And then the challenge I have is it's hard to find.
Yes.
And it's getting harder.
Right.
And I think that's the thing, because I'm a believer of it, is we should all be looking at getting high dose vitamin C, even if you don't have cancer. It doesn't hurt us.
There are reasons to do it, whether it's chronic disease, chronic fatigue syndrome, Lyme disease, you name it.
I mean, is it also a way of building our immune system?
Well, sure.
Yeah. I
think
any
of that is going to help the immune system. And so I think that it doesn't hurt. I mean, every now and then I take myself in to get what's called a Myers cocktail, which is basically vitamin C with a bunch of B vitamins and some electrolytes, right? Just because.
And
I feel better.
Yeah, I liked it because it was like, for me, it was it was to work with my cancer, but also I looked at it as it was a way of creating a force field and, armor around me with vitamin C.
Right.
And I couldn't get sick. Limited me getting sick.
Right. And I just, the challenge of finding any IVC in a reputable place, it's getting greater, because it's become a thing. You can go into an IV bar and get a hangover remedy, and you can do all these things. But a lot of the places don't necessarily put together a bag appropriately. There has to be a sterile procedure, and it has to be done correctly. So I usually, if somebody's looking somewhere around where they live, the first thing I do is look for the naturopaths or some of the functional medicine doctors to see who's doing it and to make sure that it's safe. And they've got a hood so they can mix things appropriately, that they're doing things the right way.
Yeah. Well, it's all good stuff, and I really, really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
I appreciate that you've put the time and research into what you're doing. And on top of that, just your demeanor towards the patient. It's, like I said earlier, it's so valuable to the patient. And it was something I needed, and I knew I needed it. And so when I met you, it was, really important to me and to my journey. And I'm going to get emotional here, but that's okay because it's important. What you do and how you help people, I wish there was more of you. I hope some other people hear this and realize the value of that. And I think too, just helping people understand that there are doctors and practitioners out there like this.
Right.
So seek them. If you don't like your doctor, you don't like who you're working with, go get a new one.
Right.
There's other ones. Yeah, sometimes you're limited in where we are geographically, and that's another challenge. But somewhere like Southern California, there's no shortage of doctors.
No, there's not.
They're everywhere. So find one that you want to work with. And that was important to me. I wanted an oncologist that was okay with me working with a naturopath. And I wanted a naturopath okay with me working with an oncologist.
Right.
And I wanted us to hold hands together and walk this journey. And I, again, was very lucky and blessed to have that. And it just made everything more sense. Because if an oncologist said this, I could ask them why, and they could give me a response. And then I could ask you, and maybe get the same response or a different response, and then be able to look at it and go, either it made sense or they don't know what they're talking about. But the idea is that I had resources to talk to.
Right.
And you were available. And I think that's another thing too, is having your doctor available. Right. Not just, I have to have an appointment. I think it's crazy how certain doctors today, they're so busy you can't get into them for 6 months. What happens in that 6 month time? I'm waiting.
Exactly.
And so again, you were available outside of an office visit. I think that's important too, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
I hope that us working together and even having this conversation is going to give others hope. I hope it's going to give others the willingness to seek. I think that's the other thing, is the ability to seek what's out there. And I think that's really why this platform is so important to me, because I want others to know what's out there. Right. At least go, oh, there's something different. Doesn't mean they have to do this and do this specifically, but at least they go, I wonder what's out there.
Well, it's nice to know you have options.
Yeah.
Always.
Like you said, it's not a one fit all for every patient.
Right.
And that's how I felt in the beginning when I was diagnosed. It was like they were putting me on the cancer train. Right. And it was like, it's going to Sacramento whether I wanted to go or not. Right. I want to go to, Monterey. Right. And it's taking me to Sacramento. Sure. And I think that was really, it was hard, and that fed into the fear, because why am I being treated? Like, I think the other challenge I had is they kept mixing up their words. They would say chemo, even though it was immunotherapy. Right. And I remember saying, like, why do you keep saying chemo? It's like an interchangeable word. Right. It's like hamburger. It's not McDonald's. It's not In-N-Out.
It's just a hamburger.
It's just a hamburger.
Right.
So that was tough for me, because I kept hearing, I go, wait a minute, am I doing chemo? And so it's, again, having that availability, having the team is really important. And again, I really appreciate your work, and thank you for your time today.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I will give you some information, like the website for other FABNOs across the country, if people want to do that, or how to get in touch with me or any of that.
We'll put it in the description of the podcast for sure.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to this ride and encourage you to come along. Hold on.